I'm Sonia Azad. Welcome to The Shift, a place to inspire growth, resilience, and wisdom, real connection, healthy conversation as we navigate life's changes and challenges together. Because, as I like to say, we are all each other's teachers. Thanks to our friends at A New Life Story Coaching for making this podcast possible. Hair and makeup generously provided by Glam House Collective.
Hi there, I'm Sonia Azad. Welcome to The Shift. We are at Dallas Irby today. I'm joined by my friend, Dr. Von Eaglin. How are you today?
I'm great.
All right. Mental health therapist. That's what we're calling you today. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. We're talking about one of my favorite topics, and that is relationships. This series has been a lot of fun. So you're married. We're going to talk mostly about the shift into marriage and out of marriage together today. First of all, I just want to ask, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, actually. So I've been married 19 years. I have a 3-year-old son right now. We may look at having a second one, but we'll see. So.
Okay. Did you say 19 years?
19 years.
Wow, I did not realize it'd been that long. So tell me how y'all met.
So we were in college, and I went to college early. I was a resident assistant. I was actually dating another young lady at the time, and I tried to put my game down and talk to my wife at the same time. She found out that I was a dog, so she didn't talk to me for 6 months. After that, after I broke up with the other young lady, I ended up joining her dance company to get close to her because she was a dancer at the time. And she went to professional dance. But long story short, joining her dance company, and I got to dance. And I mean, it was an easy decision. It was 2 guys and 20 women, so it wasn't that hard of a choice. But overall, I just stuck around, and yeah, we got married. I got married pretty young, around 24 years old, and we've been kind of grown together throughout our lives, and it's been really good. So.
How did you know at 24 that you wanted to be married?
That is a good, I don't know necessarily say I knew I wanted to be married, but when I saw her, now this is kind of freaky, but when I saw her, I said, that's the one I've been looking for.
Wait, why do guys always say that? I'm like, I'm not married. No one's ever looked at me and said, oh, that is the one.
So, yeah, well, I knew what I wanted, and she fit the profile, but.
What was that?
So, well, I knew what I wanted physically first.
Okay.
And
good honesty.
So, but when I met her, It was an unfolding process where I started to evolve. She was the first person that I met that it really inspired me to be a better man in some ways, because I had a lot of, I would probably say, misogynistic and narcissistic qualities at that time. And then through that process, she encouraged me to be my authentic self. In fact, my undergrad was in business finance. And then, as through her encouragement and us growing together, that's how I became a therapist. So, yeah.
Okay. But at 24, I feel like a lot of guys these days, I mean, we could be talking about 34-year-olds, 44-year-olds, they don't have that level of awareness that you're describing right now.
Right.
What is it? What happened? What's going on?
So when you say that level of awareness, well, there's a lot, it's very layered, because guys nowadays are different than when I got married.
Let's talk about that.
Okay, so when I was coming up, there was no social media, there were no dating applications, and that has changed the game quite a bit, especially for a lot of relationships just across the board. But with that being said, whenever I met my wife, again, there was something inside of me that I knew that I was ready for a change, because I had lived a certain lifestyle. I was an athlete, I played a little bit of college football. I did that whole, very lascivious lifestyle, I'll say it like that, and a bit of a player. But I wanted to change at the time, and prayed about it. And after I met her, and I started going to church with her. I started learning a lot about myself. I started growing. I had a growth-oriented mindset to try to learn more about myself in terms of self-discovery, self-actualization. And through that process, again, it was something that was transformative, and we went through it together. Now, in full total, honesty and full disclosure, she probably should have divorced me the first 6 years that we were married.
What?
I was horrible. I was a horrible guy. But again, I did not know how to interact with women. I was what's called emotionally dismissive.
Okay.
Which means that I didn't notice low intensity emotion in myself or in other people. I would try to problem solve. I wasn't very as attentive as I should have been. I didn't have a lot of mentors inside of my life, because again, the way I dealt with women was very different than how I deal with women nowadays. She stuck with me. She was very patient. And like I said, she probably, she had full grounds to probably divorce me the first 6 years we were married. So.
Wow, I have never heard a man say that. That's so interesting to me.
Yeah. So.
You mentioned going to church. Did you guys have marriage counseling, like this pre-marriage counseling?
We actually had 3 sets of counseling.
Wow.
We did marriage counseling through our church. It was a group setting. We had another woman who did marriage counseling with us, and then the family life pastor did some counseling with us. Now, through that process, again, I was trying to discover what it means to actually be a husband, because the way I defined manhood was very different back then. Most guys were socialized into defining manhood and, athleticism. If you're a great athlete, you get moved to the top of your class. You don't even have to study or, take the SAT to get in college. It was resources and money, and then sexual conquest. And so that's how I defined manhood. But then understanding and learning about what manhood is in terms from my standpoint, about learning how to give, learning how to be compassionate, learning how to be responsible, learning how to take care of others, learning how to have empathy, learning how to communicate effectively, learning how to set boundaries. There were all these components to manhood that I wasn't aware of and that I had not been exposed to growing up. So a lot of self-growth, but I would say it took me having a growth-oriented mindset to say, there's something more here. I don't understand why I'm not getting it. I just know that I suck at a lot of different things. And so, again, that was part of my process, and it worked out. So,
is that something that people generally learn while they're, you call it a process. Like, do you learn that while you're married or before you get married? I feel like you're on a continuum, so you're always learning in theory. But like, at what point did you say, or would you say to a man who's a client of yours, like, this is important, like to sort of set this foundation?
Yeah, well, with all my clients, we're going to evaluate their belief system and try to figure out, how did you come to believe what you do right now in terms of like what you believe to be true, the narrative you've established inside of your mind. And I'm going to use a term, it's called meta emotion. So let me just give you one example of this. So all of us will receive a certain emotional attachment pattern. Well, I'll say it like this. Your meta emotions are your feelings about feelings. How you look at feelings, how you understand them, how you process them, how you express them. We all get that from our family of origin. And like I said before, I was emotionally dismissive, which meant that I didn't notice low intensity emotion in myself or in other people. So my wife would come to me and I would make her feel invalidated because I would try to problem solve. I would try to make her get over her feelings very quickly. The way I looked at issues like sadness, we shouldn't talk about that, or I should stuff it. The way she looked at sadness was, hey, we need to process this. So that different meta emotion pattern would cause miscommunications. Things of that nature, again, I had to discover, I had to learn about, again, what does it take to work through a conflict effectively? As I became a therapist, I found out, and I got a lot of training in Gottman method couple therapy, that 69% of issues in couple relationships are perpetual. In other words, when you say I do, you select about 2/3 of issues for the long haul. And again, those issues aren't going away. So you need a certain skill set to manage through perpetual issues effectively, as well as work through issues that you can compromise on. So.
When you talk about your differences and then you come together, are those shaped as you're growing up, like as a child?
Yes.
Your observation of your parents or caretakers, the people around you, how you choose to problem solve, how you choose to navigate some of these emotions. Is that set like way early on?
I like to say that people are 3 things that really make up someone. Number 1, you have a genetic predisposition to be something. So I can have a client who comes in who's prone to being depressed or being an alcoholic or having bipolar disorder, anything of that nature. And then the second thing would be your environment and your experiences. You know how they say nature or nurture. Your environment and your experiences really will shape how you look at life. For instance, if I grew up in an environment that's safe, healthy, and happy, however, my wife grew up in an environment that's chaotic and there's trauma and there was abuse and a lot of transition, she's going to look at life differently. And then you also have your personality that has a predisposition based on your genetics, and your environment will shape it. But then the third thing would be your choices. What do you do with what you have? Because I can have 2 clients, let's say they're twins, they grow up in the same environment with an alcoholic father. One becomes an alcoholic and the other one becomes a lawyer. And it's like, how did that happen? Because of the choices they made with the environment that was surrounding them. So, yeah.
How do you define love? Like when you're thinking of, okay, I see this woman, and you said, when you saw your wife, that's it. That's the one, right? Is that love that you felt?
So love is defined differently. Some people talk about the differences between being in love versus, loving someone. Now, when you first meet someone and you get those little fluttery feelings, and then you go into what's called a state of limerence, a psychologist would call it being in a state of limerence. That's when oxytocin, norepinephrine, you got a lot of dopamine because, I'm trying to hunt this, guys, where we like to, the thrill is in the chase.
Listen, women hunt too, just FYI.
You hunt differently. I'll say that.
This is true.
Yeah, Whenever you have all of those hormones and then neurotransmitters going on in your body, is what's called being in a state of limerence. And actually, that is not a sustainable state. Mm-hmm. That's when, because if you know anything about brain science, there's a part of your brain called the amygdala. Mm-hmm. That's the part that senses fear or that makes you safe, and it says, okay, is this a safe environment? That part of your brain starts to underfunction when you're in love. So there are times you will be in this, infatuation stage and saying, I love this person. However, and you think you're making a smart choice. You think you're actually thinking clearly, and you're totally not.
That's why we avoid or ignore red flags.
Yes, that is correct. And so you'll see a red flag and you'll just overlook it saying, oh, it's not a big deal. However, later on, that same thing will pop back up in a way that probably is, again, if the couple knows how to deal with it in a healthy way, that's a good thing. But a lot of times those red flags will manifest later on and cause a lot of conflict.
So do you recommend that people, once they've said, okay, I think we should get married. Yeah, let's get married. Let's talk about this. You do this couples therapy, counseling sessions, in whatever, whether it's a religious or non-religious form. Do you recommend that?
I would say yes, because the process of counseling should be a process of discovery, because, saying that I love someone is not enough to really sustain a relationship, because who you connect yourself to, that will have a large effect on your mental health. Is even highly correlated to your income level. Is going to be highly correlated to, again, how you deal with the issues in life. Because, saying I love someone, that doesn't mean that they're going to be here for me whenever my back's against the wall and the chips are down, or that they're going to challenge me, or that they're going to be the person who's the sounding board whenever I come home from a hard day of work. Again, how is that person going to show up for me in a lot of different areas? If a couple hasn't been through a lot together, they've never been through in a difficult periods in their life, then it's hard to say this person's going to be there for me whenever we are going through a difficult time. Let's say our child gets sick, or let's say someone in our family gets cancer, or someone just died in our family, or we had a job transition, or you lost your job. Again, there's a lot of things that you need to consider before you get married. Not just is the sex good and do I love this person? Again, that's a very superficial way of looking at a relationship, and you need to take the time to really dive deep and try to understand this person, because this person who you marry, chances are, again, they're going to have a large effect on your mental health and, again, how you look at life and how you evolve.
Yeah, and I feel like a lot of times people are like, oh, well, all my friends are getting married, and or for women, my biological clock is ticking, I want to have children. What are some of the questions that you should for sure ask before you get married? Ask of maybe yourself or your partner. I just mentioned kids. I feel like, how does this happen where people go, well, we were on the same page, but then she changed her mind or he changed his mind. I guess we're all allowed to change our minds, but I feel like that happens a lot lately.
Yeah, so when people get together, they're going to have expectations. Some of these expectations are probably going to be unrealistic at times, but you need to talk and discuss what are your expectations whenever we get married. And everyone has room to change, because you're going to evolve over time. Now, not all couples, and I'll say this when couples come to my office, just because you love each other doesn't mean that you're meant to be together. Because
say that again.
Just because you love each other does not mean that you're meant to be together. Let me give you an example. If we fundamentally have two different dreams, for instance, let's say you want kids and I don't, but we get married, and then you said, well, I thought you would want kids. And I said, I told you I never wanted kids growing up. Well, fundamentally, you see your life going differently than I do. And at the end of the day, somebody's going to have to sacrifice their dream of what they wanted, and then they're probably going to end up bitter and resentful because I sacrificed what I wanted, because you wanted kids and I said I never wanted kids, but you thought I may change whenever we got married. I'm like, that's not a good thing. So if two people are growing in two different directions, oftentimes it's like, is this sustainable? We need to evaluate that, especially when you come into counseling. But again, you have to have some tough conversations. You need to talk about family. You need to talk about, again, you need to look at what do certain things mean? What does home mean? What do kids mean to you? Because when people argue, they're not really arguing about the stuff in the first place. In fact, when people argue, they're really arguing about their beliefs, their values, and what something means to them. And I like to use the example of money a lot, because that comes up in marriages and couples and different things all the time. So money to me as a man could mean success. It could mean fun. I want to buy myself a jet ski and a boat. I don't know if all people talk like that who like jet skis and boats. We're in Texas.
That's your impression of men, not mine.
So
we'll get to that one later.
So money could mean validation. They told me I wasn't going to be anything growing up. It could mean provision. I want to take care of my family. It could mean freedom. It could mean autonomy and independence. It can mean power. It can mean control. It can mean image. I drive up in this car. I don't have to say anything. You already know that I have it made. To a woman, oftentimes money means safety, security. It can mean family time. It can mean a lot of different things. But until we get to the meaning of something, we're not going to make as much progress as we should be making, because all I know is, oh, he likes to make money. And it's like, well, money to me may mean something different than money to you. But again, that goes across the board. Sex to you may mean something different than sex to me. Sex to me may mean validation. The more women I can, conquer, all of a sudden I feel like a man. Sex to you may be a place of pain or trauma. Sex to me may be something, a spiritual experience, or, I'm doing this because the Lord, and I'm blah, blah. Sex to you may mean something like, hey, you know what, I'm just getting off. You're just my person that I just happen to be with right now. So again, we need to get down to the meaning of things whenever we talk about things that create conflict in relationships.
But you're talking about before you get married, you have to have these conversations. Bet you most people don't.
Yes, that's correct. So, and then there's a society plays a large role in this. For instance, let me give you an example. And the trends in society. So on average, now I say on average, women do this thing called hypergamy, and you may have heard of it before, and then men do this thing called hypogamy, which means that women date across and up, okay? Men date across and down.
What does that mean?
So, for instance, let's say a woman she goes to college, and women are outpacing men. There's about 2 to 1 right now. So you have women that graduate and then they get a good job. Let's say they make 6 figures or $150,000 a year. They want a partner that's equal to them.
Correct.
Okay. There aren't a lot of men who are as equal because there are not a lot of college graduates. And what'll happen is that they'll date across and up, meaning that I want to date a man who is at least as educated as I am and has at least the salary that I do.
I can confirm.
Right. Men don't. Okay. Which means
I can also confirm that.
So let me here's an extreme example. If Jay-Z walked into Burger King and saw Beyonce still may have an opportunity to get Jay-Z. However, if the opposite were true, if Beyonce walked in, Jay-Z has no shot. And so think Pretty Woman. And so, because the guy who makes a lot of money, he's highly prized, and people talk about it, he's a high value male. So he'll get all these looks from all these women and have all these opportunities. And then there's a section of men who are just lost and forgotten. They don't have the education, they can't signal the resources. And so these women aren't going for them. So what'll happen is that you have almost like this dichotomy within the dating world of there are men who are high functioning, who all the women are clamoring for, and they'll choose the woman that makes 150, but they'll also go date the barista on the corner who works out all the time. You know what I mean? So they're in competition they're all in competition for this high value male, so to speak. And then there's a section of men who are just not seen. They're not seen by all these women. And of course, and then they go off into their man cave and do things like look at a lot of porn and play video games, and they don't work, and so the trends in society play a role inside the dating world. And so, it's very difficult, I will say that, but
and some of those men that you're talking about could be like very nice people, but they're just not emerging in front of the women who might be looking for marriage. Specifically, we're talking about marriage. You mentioned seeing couples at the same time. By the time people come to you, are you seeing one person who's complaining, or are you seeing both people who are like, we want to try to solve this problem together? Or option number 3, is it like one person dragging the other person in?
So number 1, most couples seek couples counseling about 6 to 7 years after they should have. Oh. Okay. So is
that too late?
I'll say it like this, is that if it's almost like, let's say you have someone who gets wounded, let's say I get shot. And then all of a sudden I go to the ER 6 or 7 years later, and I've been walking around with this wound, and it's like this stuff has festered. I may have had, it may have gangrene, so on and so forth. But so they come to counseling usually after they should have. So, and usually when they come to counseling, it's the woman who has influenced them to come. So when men come into counseling, just on average, they're not, usually some woman in their life has influenced them to come. Some mother, hey, you're crazy, something's going on here, you've been in your room too long, you're not making progress. It could be a wife, it could be a sister, it could be a daughter, something's going on with dad. But by and large, men, when we come into therapy, we're not necessarily raring to go. Now, there are some guys who are looking for self-development. So I have some guys, in fact, I have a large caseload of men because I usually specialize with a lot of men and athletes as well. However, but by and large, guys, we don't come into counseling voluntarily. Someone in our life has influenced us to come. We've had experience with it, or it's like the Hail Mary, it's the long bomb. I don't have anywhere else to turn. And so that's usually when I see guys come in. And when they do come in, I like to see couples together. You know, I don't want one person feeling like I'm biased toward the other. So when in my initial interview, again, I meet with both of them together. And then the second meeting, I'm going to meet with each of them separately. And in the third meeting, I'm going to be creating a treatment plan for them to help them navigate through all the issues that they have going on in their relationship.
I want to talk about divorce because I mean, I've never been married, so I've never been divorced. So I've never gone through that decision-making process. But I feel like, at least in the dating world right now, a lot of men, I mean, because I interact with men, right? So don't want to get married. I guess I could say women are like this too. My friends and I talk about this because they don't want to get divorced. Well, the divorce rates are so high, so why even bother, basically? That's kind of the narrative right now. Why are the divorce rates so high?
Well, divorce actually was going up and up until around the 1980s, and then there was this leveling off process. So divorce hasn't continued to rise. It's pretty much stable around, between around 55%, give or take some. But when you say why are the divorce rates so high, so it doesn't matter whether people get divorced or not, they still would like to be in a relationship. Now, in America nowadays, when I was doing my research for my PhD, the majority of marriages that happen in America nowadays, at least one person has already experienced divorce. And so what that means is that even though people get divorced, they still want to be in relationships. However, they may not have the skill set to navigate a relationship like they need to. It's a certain skill set that you need because, again, conflict is inevitable. It's going to happen in every relationship. In fact, conflict is necessary in a relationship to grow the relationship. But when it's not dealt with effectively, that's when you see a lot of divorce rates and, again, societal expectations. There's a lot of other things that go into this. But again, divorce is something that is prevalent in our society. It's not going away. But even though they get divorced, they still would like to be in another relationship.
What about people who go, well, we want to be in a relationship like you're describing, but we never want to get married?
So, I mean, I've seen couples, I've seen all kind of couples come in my office. So couples in open relationships, polyamorous relationships. I've seen gay couples, lesbian couples. I've seen couples that are in the kink community. I've seen all kind of couples. But some couples who say, you know what, we may not want to be saddled with the legality piece of it because, let's say someone has high net worth. Well, I don't want to, have to sign a prenup, and then nowadays prenups sometimes even cost more to defend than it is to just get married and get divorced.
So prenups aside, I just wonder if it's a fear-based decision to not want to get married. Like, I want to be in this committed relationship, but people are like, but we're fine like this. And so we just want to exist like this. I'm not judging it. I'm just saying, is there like a psychological reason perhaps behind that decision?
There could be. Everyone is different. However, marriage in the past used to represent something totally different. For men to have sex with a woman, they needed to get married to her. But with the advent of contraceptives and, there's a morning after pill, the toll for being pregnant or to the potential to get pregnant is much lower for women. Because pregnancy is expensive for women. Like you get saddled with a kid and, 18 years and a guy can just have sex with a woman and go on about his business. So again, guys would need to get married in order to get some of those benefits. Nowadays, people have sex regularly and there are not as many consequences, at least, how
I'm
they're
like,
thinking
rewind. There are a lot of consequences, especially if you live in certain parts of the country right now.
I agree.
So when you're contemplating divorce, or let's say one person is, because usually I feel like it's one person goes, I want to get a divorce, right? Or at least in the movies. How do you navigate that?
When someone wants to get divorced, they need to really, I usually say this, never make any big decisions when it's the HALT acronym, hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. And so
hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. Okay.
And so whenever you're divorced, chances are what leads to divorce is that there's a cascading effect. Now, whenever someone starts to have conflict in a relationship, and let's say you're my wife, you do something I don't like. What will happen is that the only way I can start to justify that is like, you're doing something I don't like, but I still love you, I still care for you. I start to reach this state of what's called cognitive dissonance. So in other words, I'm in conflict within my psyche. And the only way I usually can justify this cognitive dissonance is start to think that, you know what, you're selfish. That's the only way I can explain away how you're so negative towards me. Now, after a while, trust starts to erode, and trust is the foundational piece of every relationship. Segue, or a side note, a caveat rather, trust, it comes in many different forms in a relationship. Can I trust you're gonna bring home the bacon? Can I trust that the money that you do bring home, you're gonna be a good financial steward of it? Can I trust you're gonna be a good father? Can I trust you sexually whenever when I'm in the mood? Can I trust that, you won't cheat on me? So trust comes in many different forms. However, when you start to not trust your partner, that's when the deterioration starts to come in. And then you develop this, what's called negative perspective. In counseling, we call it negative sentiment override. So I start to view you through this certain lens. And because I view you through this certain lens, it colors all of our interactions. And let's say I have positive perspective towards you. You call me, or let's say I call you, you say, hey, Vaughn, I can't talk right now, I'm doing an interview. Hey, you hang the phone up. If I think positively about you, that's the lens I view you through. I'm gonna say, she's busy, something's going on, she'll get back with me later. But if I view you negatively, we've had a lot of poor interactions. You've taken a lot of money out of my emotional bank account. When you hang the phone up in my face, I'm gonna think something totally different. Oh, she's never here for me. I can't believe it. There she goes again. She's such a, so on and so forth. So it colors our interactions. And when I think about it like that, it doesn't matter whether it's a good interaction, a neutral interaction, or a negative interaction, I will color all those interactions as negative. And then I will start to misjudge things. That leads to higher conflict, whether we're in a conflict and outside of conflict. So when a couple has a lot of what's called negative perspective, they come into my office, chances are issues come in and they go left field really quickly. Hey, would you mind not using that spatula and that pan? Oh, by the way, you've been spending too much money. And then 5 minutes later, it's like, and you're just like your mother. It's like, how did we get there? We just talked about the spatula and the pan. Negative perspective. And so it's called an absorbing state. So it's like quicksand. So
you talked about this very important big word, trust. So when that turns and you have this negative perspective of someone and it just grows and festers, and then you're 30, 40 years into a marriage, is that reason to get a divorce?
Trust can be rebuilt, but it takes time. And it takes a lot of consistency. Things like being transparent, things like not having a double life, things like being ethical, not only with you, but with other people as well. But it can be destroyed in an instant. For instance, let's say we're married 25 years. All of a sudden I'm on a business trip, my iPad is linked to the phone, and you just see a text message come up, can't wait to see you tonight. Well, 25 years of trust is out the window. What do I need to do in order to rebuild trust? So again, trust is it can be fragile at times, and it takes time to rebuild, but it takes a lot of consistency, a lot of effort, a lot of intentionality to build trust. But when it is violated, if you don't do the things to actually process through the trust appropriately, then what will happen is that it's going to erode the relationship. You're going to rehearse and remember that continuously, and things will start to continue to devolve. One thing I would like people to know is that whenever there's a lack of trust in a relationship, because when I interview clients, their brain will literally start to rewrite history. You have explicit and implicit thoughts. So when I interview someone and they start talking about their relationship, the beginning parts of their relationship, and they remember all these difficult times. Oh yeah, the waiter was late, and the food was horrible, and the wine was spilt. Well, you're rewriting your memory, and it's symbolic, indicative of there's been some lack of trust, there's been some wounds here, and so on and so forth. But if they remember fondly, it was what we call we-ness, us against the world. We were together, we made it through this, and we did this, and that's a good thing. That's like, okay, I got something to work with here. So.
I think it sounds like a miserable way to live. Scenario number one.
Yes.
Right? And so you mentioned doing this work, not just as an individual, but as a unit. I hope that more people are taking advantage of coming and seeing experts like you. I know that in some cultures and in some communities that is not, it's not what you lean into. It's like, oh, no, we don't talk about our problems. We don't share our problems. That's private. We don't need counseling or therapy, and that's woo-woo and that's silly.
what do you say to those people, if there are those types of people listening out there today?
Well, I would definitely say that you need to give counseling a chance. You need to be open to it. I know I wasn't open to it. My first therapist was someone looked just like you, and I gave her hell. And I was like, you don't know me, I'm a black man, you've never been pulled out of a car. And I was totally just dismissive of her. I felt like she couldn't identify with who I was as a man, my feelings. And then my girlfriend, who's now my wife, said, you need to give her an opportunity. And about the third session, I was crying. I didn't realize I was angry at this person in my life. So there is a stigma, especially within different cultures and different demographic populations. However, it's coming down. You see more athletes going to counseling. You see more people talking about mental health more than ever before. And as that stigma continues to come down, take the time, try to evaluate if you need some help yourself. And again, it's a growth process, it's a process of self-awareness. And sometimes in a relationship, when one person grows and the other person doesn't, sometimes it can start to be unequal, and then that can also separate a relationship too. So
best part of being married for you?
It sounds weird to say this, but the thing that's probably grown me the most has probably been our conflict. Because that conflict has allowed me to identify certain parts of myself. Because when you get married, it's almost like a mirror. It's like they see all the good, the bad, and the ugly. I would say the best part of being married for me would be that my wife fully accepts who I am. I can be my authentic self, my vulnerable self. She's a place of safety. And I hope that I am that for her as well. But again, there's something that is, and then again, we've been married 19 years. So we know everything about each other, and we've been able to grow together. So I enjoy being married to my wife. So yeah.
I feel like I need to bring her on and see if she'd say the same thing about you. You have given me a lot of great reading recommendations, book recommendations. My favorite one, I think, is Boundaries, but I wanted to give you an opportunity to share what you suggest, like if there's one thing people should read to make them maybe a better partner, maybe not convince them to get married, but help them navigate whether they can shift into that or maybe they need to shift out of that. What would it be?
I'll give a few book recommendations for my guys. All of my guys, I recommend Gottman and Gottman's. It's a book about women and helping them understand about women. The book I mainly recommend to all of my guys would be The Man's Guide to Women, because it helps them understand how women think. There's several chapters about sex. Like some guys talk about, I know what a G-spot is. Do you know what the A-spot is, or the U-spot? And they're like, okay. It talks about why does it take women so long to buy a pair of shoes, how stress is not attractive to women. It goes through conflict. So that's the book I would definitely recommend to a lot of my guys. But Gottman has a lot of books. I would say The 7 Principles for Making Marriage Work would be one of his seminal works. And there are a lot of activities. And if you're looking to get married, Gottman has a book called 8 Dates. It talks about having essential conversations, the conversations that you need to have before you get married. I would probably recommend that book. Now, the book with boundaries, the one I would probably recommend the most, is called Set Boundaries, Find Peace. Set Boundaries, Find Peace. And if you're wondering why you start to attract certain people or why you get attached to certain people, the book Attached goes into detail about why is it I'm attracted to this person, and do I have an anxious or avoidant or anxious avoidant or a secure attachment, and then how to work through that. So
I've read that one too. That was another good one, and I should probably reread it. Dr. Eaglin, thank you so much. It was really good to see you. I could talk to you about this forever. I really do want to. I should bring you and your wife on together. That would be a good episode. Thank you so much for your time today. And thank you all for watching The Shift. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and of course, comment. Ask us your questions. We'll hook you up with this guy. All right, we'll see you next time on The Shift.
This podcast is sponsored by A New Life Story Coaching. Feeling stuck in life? Battling emotional hurdles and repeating familiar patterns? Are you yearning for a fresh narrative? Seek support at A New Life Story Coaching. We'll guide you in unveiling subconscious beliefs and emotional barriers, empowering you to script a life story that resonates with your true self. Embark on your transformation today by visiting anewlifestorycoaching.com. Your new chapter awaits. And don't forget about our friends at Glam House Collective. Let's get glam.